Good morning. I'm Rosemary Pena, President of the Black German Heritage and Research Association and adjunct professor of German Studies at UBC Vancouver. Our conversation today is the sixth in our new Black Germany and Beyond conversation series. My colleague, Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath, our students and I are delighted to welcome to our virtual classroom Jeannine Kantara and Jeanette Footman, whose remarkable friendship extends across oceans and over many years. But before our discussion begins, I'll ask Emily to please share a little about our class that we co-teach together at Davidson College before introducing our students and then our special guests. Emily?
Thank you, Rosemary. My name is Emily Fraser-Rath, and I'm a visiting assistant professor of German Studies at Davidson College, located just north of Charlotte, North Carolina in the US. I'm also the executive director of the BGHRA. We are so excited to invite Jeannine Kantara and Jeanette Footman to our class, to Davidson College, and to the BGHRA today. Today is March 24th, 2022, and we, Dr. Pena, me, and most importantly, our incredible Davidson students are in our 9th week together. This semester, Dr. Pena and I are so pleased to have another opportunity to work with Davidson students as we co-teach our second course together. German 351, or Race, Gender, Migration, asks us to employ a critical lens informed by Black German studies to questions of migration, belonging, and identity, as these big human topics intersect with Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, with the German-speaking world, and with the lives and experiences of the global Black German community. The class, like its predecessor, consists of 3 parts. It is first an exploration of the aforementioned themes as they are or could be handled in the field of Black German studies. Second, it is a community-based learning course as we support the BGHRA through our work and will feature our final projects in the BGHRA archive. And third, it is most importantly an opportunity for students and through these recordings, our broader BGHRA and Davidson communities to speak with people whose lives and work intersect with, influence, shape, and inform Black German studies. This series would not be possible without the generous support of the Dean Rusk International Studies Program Speakers Fund here at Davidson and the interim director of the Dean Rusk program, Dr. Verna Case, as well as its program administrator, Mel Zweifel. I also cannot ever thank Meg Zwicky enough, our German Studies Department Administrator, for her support, encouragement, and organization that has truly kept us going and remains a vital part of what we are doing. So to Meg, Mel, and to Verna, thank you. Before Dr. Pena and I fade into the background and turn things over to Jeanette, Jeannine, and to our wonderful students, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our guests. Jeanette Footman and Jeannine Kantara first saw each other at a wedding of mutual friends of their parents in East Berlin in January 1978. Their fathers, however, one from Cameroon, the other from Guinea, already knew each other since 1964, as they were both sent as students to the former German Democratic Republic, or East Berlin, or East Germany, excuse me. One of them by an opposing party to his government and the other by his government. Both fell in love with German women, had families, and decided to stay. When Jeanette and Jeannine, who were 9 and 10, or 10 and 9 respectively, met at their wedding reception, they became fast friends. But little did they know that their friendship would last over 4 decades and continues to this day, as Rosemary mentioned. Well, Jeanette Footman, a mother of 3, lives with her family in Indianapolis, where she co-owns the Perk Up Cafe with Alice Matsuo. Jeannine Kantara resides in Berlin with her husband and her 2 children. We actually had the pleasure of talking with John Kantara earlier this semester. Today, we are excited to talk with Jeanette and Jeannine about their childhood in East Germany and how their families escaped to West Berlin, what it was like to grow up in a communist society, what it was like to be a Black child in the GDR, How did Jeannine and Jeanette's fathers end up in East Germany? How did their parents cope with the challenge of being Black and white couple and raising Black children? Is there an actual history of Black people in East Germany? And how do these two women look at the evolution of the Black communities in the United States and Germany? These are the questions we would like to discuss today, and hopefully many more, to give insight into a particular aspect of Black German experience, which hitherto is little unknown. In preparation for today's conversation, we, our students, and Rosemary and I have viewed several photos of Jeanette's father taken at the time he was working for DEFA in the GDR, and explored her cafe online, unfortunately not in person yet. We've also read an interview with Jeannine's family entitled Die Kinder können sich schon wehren, Papa, published in the news magazine Die Zeit, and a letter written by Jeannine for her children entitled Gestern, heute und darüber hinaus, Brief einer afro-deutschen Mutter an ihre Kinder, first published in Vaterbekennen. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Jeanette, Jeannine, and our students. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for having us, first of all.
Yes, thank you very much, Emily, for this thorough introduction. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here today. And the funny thing, and I think I speak for Jeanette as well, is that when Rosemary first pitched the idea of us talking about our childhood experiences, we thought, well, that's really funny that we should talk about something that is completely natural for us, and that it could be of interest actually for young people in the United States. And for us, probably it's a normal experience, but looking at it from the outside, it's probably not a normal experience because, as you said, our friendship has been in existence for 44 years now. Actually, every year on the 28th of January, we congratulate each other, and that is actually the day that we met. And in preparation for this talk, I thought about this relationship quite a lot, and I thought, yeah, it is actually something really special, although we probably don't see it as such. But I learned to appreciate it much more than I probably did during the past years because I always took it for granted. We haven't seen each other in person since, when was the last time
2019.
On your dad's birthday, 80th birthday, exactly. So it's been 3 years. And before that, since you moved to the United States, we haven't seen that much of each other either, but still the bond is still there. And your sister Jeanette, I have to say, it was also during our teenage years, it was the three of us actually. It was Jeanette, her younger sister, and me. So it was the 3 J's. And Jeanette, she lives in Berlin as well. So I have contact with her as well. So yeah. Now, talking about my childhood in the GDR, as you said, I was born in East Berlin in 1968 to an East Berlin mother, East Berlin family. I put an emphasis on that because it's something special to be Berliners. They have a special way of handling things, of talking, of just of being. And what's important is that my mom always had a bit of a rebellious side. First of all, she wasn't in the official party, the SED, which made her life a bit difficult. Contrary to my grandmother, who was a very convinced communist, and she believed in the system of the GDR. She was the nicest person I could actually imagine, but she was a communist at heart. So when my mom actually met my dad, she was probably not amused, but she had the idea that, okay, it's love, so we just accept it. And that's something special in the 1960s in Germany. I know lots of relationships between white German women and Africans. They couldn't last because society simply didn't accept it. And so that was something special, and I'm really grateful for my grandmother that she accepted it. The same for my grandfather. My grandparents were divorced at that time already, but they never made me feel like I don't belong. So they loved me dearly, and for them it's not easy. Having a black grandchild, but they never made me feel that it is a problem. So they played an important role in that. My mom was quite young when she brought me. She was 20, 21. And my dad was there for the first 2 years of my existence. And then he left. He came from Guinea as a student in 1964. It wasn't his choice to come to the GDR. He was sent by the government. And he told me once that when he heard he was supposed to study in Germany, he was like, yeah, that's great. And then somebody told him, yeah, you have to go to East Germany. And he was like, oh, no. So he rather wanted to go to the West, but of course he couldn't decide where to go. And he couldn't decide. He was an economics student. I was never good at math, and suddenly I was supposed to be an economics student. So he said, okay, I go to Germany, fine. He was 20, or I think he was 23, 24, something like that. And he arrived in February of 1964, which was a very, very cold winter. And he was together with, I think, about 15 other African students from, not only from Guinea, I think there was some from Cameroon as well. And I'm not quite sure, I think from Senegal. They were all French speaking, no? And he told me they were standing at this freezing airport, Schönefeld Airport in Berlin. And that was their first impression. It was cold. It was cold. They saw snow. It was cold. And they had to walk to their accommodation, and they just had the light clothing, African clothing. So that was his first experience. And what my dad did was everything apart from studying, because he was a young man, he wanted to have fun. He formed a band because he's a musician. And I think I sent you a photograph of his band. I don't know whether we can show that. He formed a band which was called Les Gentils Compagnons. And with that band, they toured basically the whole of the former GDR and just had fun, just had a good time, and they were very well liked because where they turned up, it was fun. But what he didn't do was study. So after a certain while, the German state actually said, well, this guy is never there. We have to send him back, because he's not filling his requirements. He's supposed to be studying here. So he said that's when he actually decided, okay, I have to do something. And while he was traveling, while he was playing, he met my mom, who was 18 years at that time. And she told me she saw this beautiful black man, and that was it. So 3 years later, I was there, and they were a little family, and my father wanted to stay, and he couldn't for several reasons. The idea was for African students to study in the former GDR and to go back to their country, and of course he didn't want that, but he was sent back to Guinea. So he left, and I really don't, that is the picture of his band. Yeah, and he is actually the one, the tall one, the third from the right, with the guitar, and all of the other ones, except for the for the white guy, he was actually one from the Stasi, which is the East
Secret
German
police. Secret police.
police, yeah, secret police. And they always had minders around, and he wanted to be in that photo, so this guy is in that photo as well. So, and I think that picture was taken around, I don't know, it must be 65, yeah, 66, something like that. And all except my dad and the guy on the left, on the far left, which is actually that is the friend who got married, and that his wedding was the wedding where Jeanette and I met, Luc. He is still alive. The rest of them, they all have died now. So my father and Luc are still alive. Yes, that's the picture. Where was I? Yeah, my father had to return to Guinea, and he fought for 4 years to come back to East Germany, which he managed. And at that point, I was 6 years old when he came back. So I hadn't seen him for 4 years. And then my parents got married, and they wanted to build a life in East Germany. It didn't work out for so many reasons. And then 2 years later, he had to leave again. And my dad, I hear somebody.
No, that was my son. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and after 2 years, to cut it short, after 2 years my mother actually decided to go to Africa. And my father didn't want us to come to Guinea because for political reasons. By that time, he had actually fled to the Ivory Coast, to Abidjan. And that's where we went, my mom and I. And that was half a year after I met Jeanette. And we went to Africa thinking we would be staying there. It didn't work out for other reasons again. And a year later, we were back. And then we moved to West Germany. I didn't know anybody in West Germany except Jeanette and her family. And I was 13, 14 at that time. And ever since then, we were BFFs, as you would call it. And we basically spent our teenage years together.
Together. Yep.
So
yeah,
that's quickly my history. And now, yes.
When we were young, yes.
When we were young, exactly. That was about when we were, I don't know, 13, 14,
15,
like
yeah,
that?
something like that. Yes.
So over to you.
Okay, well, yes, I'm Jeanette, and like the same with Jeannine, I think we were like, in a way, exceptions among Black Germans, that our parents were together. We met so many Black Germans, Afro-Germans, that didn't know their father. And we were kind of an exception, that our parents were together and, never got divorced, always stayed together. And the same as with Jeannine as well. My grandparents loved my dad. They took him, into the family. There was never any issues. And the same with Jeannine. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. I loved them very much. They loved me. I didn't feel any discrimination or any different, that they would kind of be different to me than to my cousins. And I had a nice childhood. And I think because my parents were together, I developed a healthy self-esteem. And my mother always told me there will be people that will try to make you feel less than, but that you don't have to feel that way, because you're as good as them, and don't let them tell you you are not. So I had really great support from home. When my father finished his apprenticeship, because he came in 1959 from Cameroon and also into the GDR, and he became a photographer. And after he finished his studies and got married to my mother, he had to leave. He had to leave the East Germany. I still don't know why. When I go back to Germany, I want to look into the files to see, into the Stasi files, the secret police files, to see why he actually had to leave. So it took like 4 years for my mother, my sister, and I to be able to be reunited with him in West Berlin. During those 4 years, people tried to convince my dad, oh, you're in West Berlin now. Why don't you just leave your wife behind? You can find a new woman here. But yeah, my father was like, no, I stick with them. He came every weekend to visit us. And back then, you had to pay to get into East Berlin. So you had to pay for each day that you stayed in East Berlin. You had to pay 25 West German marks. And what he had to do is he would come on a Saturday morning. He would have to go back to the border, cross over into West Berlin, cross back over into East Berlin to stay on Sunday. So it wasn't like, okay, I'm coming Saturday morning and I'm leaving Sunday night. He had every evening, he had to go cross the border to come back. And and he did that for 4 years. So for me, my father not being there wasn't as hard as for my sister. She missed my dad a lot. And I remember an episode where she was at some bus stop and she saw another African man. And she took him by the hand and brought him to our house and told him, oh, my mom is home, because she missed my dad. My mom was like opening the door and my sister standing there with some strange African man. Had to tell him, I'm married, I'm sorry, but I guess my daughter misses her dad. So so that's basically, I've moved here to the United States, like 27 years ago. So I've closely now lived longer here in the States than I've lived in Germany. And and I'm so happy that Jeannine and I are still so connected after all these years. And we spent a lot of times. We actually lived at the same time in England together. We spent summer vacations together. So we spent a lot of time together. So that's it for me for right now. I hope there are lots of questions.
So I actually think that a bunch of people got kicked off the call because the Wi-Fi on Davidson's campus cut out. So
okay.
yeah, that's why there's only me and Brayla on her iPhone.
Okay. So
sorry about that.
That's right. Do you have to restart or something?
I think it's a Davidson campus-wide Wi-Fi outage.
Really?
Oh wow. Okay.
Okay.
So all the people on campus got cut off right now, I think.
Oh.
And Carson is texting me and she says she can't get onto anything right now. So.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Yes. Oh well, things happen. Do you have any questions for us? I mean, are you familiar with how East and West Germany, how it was kind of separated, Rebecca?
I'm a little familiar with it. I've been taking German and learning German since kindergarten. So this has been something that we talk about every year, I guess, in school. So I'm a little familiar with it, but it's interesting getting to see firsthand what it was actually like.
Yeah, because a lot of, if you're not familiar with that situation, a lot of young people like you, they might not even know there was a wall between the two Germanys, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know a bit about the history of the two Germanys. I mean, the Bundesrepublik was the GDR was formed in 1949, then you had two different separate states: the Federal Republic of Germany and the German Democratic Republic of Germany, German Democratic Republic. Of course, they were they had different ideological systems, which and the wall came much later. The wall was built, but there was always a competition between these two Germanys, and in terms of getting recognized by international institutions and other countries. And I'm not sure whether you heard something called Hallstein, which was with actually a set of beliefs by West Germany how to deal with foreign countries and relations. And the idea was, if any state is seeking diplomatic relations with the GDR, the Bundesrepublik, the Federal Republic, won't have relations with this country, which was a problem for all those countries who wanted to have diplomatic relations with both of them. So if one state decided, I'm recognizing the GDR, then they might risk not being accepted by the Federal Republic. So when the African countries became independent, Guinea became independent in 58, for example, both German states tried to make connections with these, or diplomatic relations with the newly independent states. And Guinea, where my father came from, they actually they had an affinity towards the communist regime. So that's why my father had to go to the GDR. My husband's father, John, he's from Ghana, and he came to Hamburg, to West Germany, because Ghana had more relations with Western Germany, but ended up in East Germany. But as I said, if he could have chosen where to go, he would have preferred to go to West Germany, but it wasn't up to him. I don't think that too many people in Germany know this either. And sometimes I feel that the generation of our fathers is a bit of a lost generation, because for them, coming to Germany is part of German history, which is not really told. For them, there are also no exact figures of how many students actually came in
the 1950s
and
between 60s.
59 and
you cutting in and out. Jeannine, you cutting in and out sometimes.
Yeah. Am I still? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sometimes you in and out. Yeah, you cutting in and out. So we see you, but we can't always hear you.
Sometimes you can't hear me. Yeah, okay. Now I was going to say, yeah, just quickly, I wanted to say that there is an estimate that between 1951 and 1989, when the wall came down, between 65,000 and 70, I've written it down, 78,400 foreign students actually got a degree in East Germany. But I'm not sure that this figure is actually right, but just to have an idea. And they came from 120 nations. So that's quite a lot.
I have a question I'd like to ask, if you don't mind, to the two of you. One of the things that I'm always curious about is childhoods. And the two of you have experienced a childhood in the East, a childhood in the West, and you've also raised children at a different time. So first, before I let you describe those childhoods, Is it okay if I share a picture of a little girl that was shared with me this morning?
Sure.
Okay, let's see. Let me share my screen here, and then maybe that'll start that conversation a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's me with my dad at the East German Zoo, where they let you pose with a little lion. So yeah, I don't know why I look so serious, because there's a picture of me too where I hold the lion by myself and I look actually pretty comfortable. So maybe that was just a first try or something. I don't know. So actually, Jeannine and I, for this interview, we talked about our childhoods, and it was a little different for each of us. I have to say, I had a great childhood in school as well. I had an awesome teacher, so I never felt that I was at a disadvantage or was treated bad. I I have nothing bad to say about my childhood in East Germany. I just had a great, it was great. I mean, I was totally involved in it and I loved it because they kept us children active and engaged, because there were so many things going on that you could be a part of. I was a good student in school, so I got quite a few opportunities for different things. The year before we actually moved to West Germany, after we left, they came around, wanted to find out if there are any kids that are musical. So I would have gone to a special music school, which then never happened because we moved to West Berlin. But yes, I was in sports, involved in sports. So I had a great childhood actually in East Germany. So maybe I'll let Jeannine tell a little bit about her experience.
Well, my experience at school wasn't that nice. I still remember that we had one teacher who, I don't think she particularly hated me. I had the feeling she hated children in general, which didn't make her the best person for this job. But she was one telling me all the time how lucky I was that that I was allowed to live in East Germany, because all my relatives in Africa were poor and had nothing to eat. That was her philosophy. So I had to be eternally grateful for the privilege of being there. I remember some of the kids being quite cruel. I mean, they always calling you names and wanting to touch your hair and stuff like that. So I got in confrontations several times, and but I always was quite good with words, so I could actually defend myself. But I was a good student too, that's true. And I did a lot of sports. I was on a swim team actually, which I enjoyed quite a lot. I started swimming when I was 4, I think. And in East Germany, everything was about competition. So once you had a talent, you were forced into that system and everything was a competition. So you had lessons, I don't know how many times a week and late at night, because yeah, that was what you were supposed to do. And my mom told me, and I still remember, before you went into the pool, actually, you had to do, how do you call it? Appel. You had to, how do you say that in English? You had to stand in line. You had to stand in line, and I don't think you had to salute, but it was like a ritual, you had to do. And the same thing you had to do when the lesson was finished. So it wasn't a problem. And I remember that outside it was quite cold. So before you went in, it wasn't a problem. But when you came out, you were wet. And we were standing there freezing like this. And I had this blue bathing suit, and my mom said my lips had the same color as the bathing suit. It was so cold, and we were like kids, but still it was the tradition and the communist thing. You had to do that, and it was always not for fun, but because you had to fulfill a certain role in that system. And my mom eventually took me out of that, out of it, because she said that that's no way to raise a child, which actually got her into trouble. But yeah, that's how I remember it. I wasn't really unhappy, but I wasn't happy either. So looking from an adult perspective now, I think that was the indoctrination was in full swing from when you were very little. You always had to have a purpose, and I always had to be grateful for the privilege of being raised in Germany, as if it was something special. I mean, I was German. There was nothing I had to be grateful for, but I didn't know that as a child. I always had the feeling, oh, I have to be twice as good as the rest of them because I have to earn it. You know.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I said before that it's interesting getting to hear firsthand what it was like, because throughout middle school and high school, I had a mix of teachers who were from Germany and not from Germany, but we seem to have watched Goodbye Lenin. I'm sure you guys know Goodbye Lenin every year. So I guess those themes are what stuck with me. But I guess a big theme in that story is political activism. And I'm wondering if any of your family members, if you had brothers or sisters or parents who were politically, racially, or socially active, that's not how you say it, or who participated in activism, political activism. And if so, how that shaped your outlook on the divide of Germany.
Well, I mean, my mother was not in the party either, like Jeannine's mother wasn't. And she was lucky, though, that she worked for a butcher shop, and the butcher shop owner, too. He was not in the party. He didn't go vote. He always got in trouble for not voting because it was mandatory that you went to vote. There's one party that was there. So, I mean, you didn't really have a choice, but he didn't. So she worked in a place which was pretty liberal. So for them, you know, they would talk about the government and, you know, and yeah, there was not a doctrine, but in school, kind of in a way, it was like Jeannine was saying too, every Monday morning, we all had little uniforms, you know, for elementary school, and for elementary, middle school, you had the same uniforms. And then for high school, you had another uniform. So you had your shirt, you had your little neck scarf that you had to wear. And there was the flag. And in the morning before school started on Monday, they pulled up the flag. You had to stand there. You had to give your little speech. I can't even remember what we had to say. It didn't matter what the weather was, rain or shine. You standing out there, that was the first thing you did Monday morning. And there was no way around it. And school books as well. Everything was very militarized. I mean, you saw a lot of soldiers in your school books, you know. So in that regard, it was. But I think we were lucky in a way because we grew up pretty free and with different opinions. I mean, you were not actually even allowed to watch the news channels of the West. You were supposed to only watch the East German television. But I mean, that was not the case because it was so boring. I mean, we would watch, but we wouldn't tell a lot of people we watched a West German television. We just did, but you didn't really go out and said, oh, I watched this West German TV show or whatever. Yeah, you didn't do that because there were spies basically everywhere.
Yeah, and you have to understand, as Jeanette said, this society was a society of spies. So it was based on distrust, which means it could be your neighbor who was actually spying on you, and they could have a file on you. I know there was a file on my parents because whenever you were involved with a foreigner, there was a file on you, and you had to be very careful what to say and to whom you had to say it. And at the same time, the structure for a child, actually, these structures of being a pioneer, you called it.
A
First one,
pioneer,
you were
like a little mini soldier,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
it was like a Boy Scout, but with a political agenda.
And
I think so. And the scarf, first it was a blue scarf for the little ones, and later it became a red scarf, Theermann Pionier. And you had to say, seid bereit, immer bereit. Be ready, always
always
ready.
ready.
That was always ready. That was
Right.
And it sort of, as a child, it gave you a certain, how do you say, a certain security to belong to a club. I could understand the appeal of it, because you didn't understand what it actually meant. As I said, it was an indoctrination, of course. It was also of course, Russia was our friend. Russians were our friends. Americans were bad. That was a thing. Hence, you shouldn't watch anything, any news from the West and so on. And my mom, she was never quiet. She was always voicing her opinion, which got her in trouble, actually. She wasn't like rallying or something, but it was more like not so quiet protest, but she was always against the rules. When teachers were giving me bad grades for whatever, she was there saying, oh, I hate this whole system and it's stupid what you do, which wasn't actually helpful for my school career, but she always said what she was thinking. And she got in conflict with my grandmother. As I said, my grandmother was a convinced communist. And so they always had discussions about their political views. And my grandmother, she was more like, oh, you can't say that, please, just keep quiet and don't actually put too much attention on this, because she was afraid, But in the end, they always stood together, especially when it came to me. And I just remember it was a system of fear, and I realized I never want to live in that sort of society anymore, where you have to be afraid to voice your opinion or your political views. So I think that was something that stuck with me. Yes, definitely. And maybe that's also part because why I later decided to become more active in the Black German organization, and just to actually say this isn't okay. So to voice what I think is necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like Jeannine was saying, having a file on everybody, just as a little example, one time my dad had a lot of friends that studied outside of East Germany, some in Russian, Poland, Hungary. And one friend invited us actually to the Ukraine. So I've been to Kiev before. And my parents had to go to the Russian embassy for the visa. And when my mom came back, she was just so shaken, because she said, I didn't have to say anything. They knew everything about us. I mean, when we went in there, they had a file and they knew everything about our life. So I think she understood that they would know about us and they would know some stuff about us. But I think it must have been in such a detail that she was kind of shocked. I remember that because I was already like 17 or something. And yeah, she was just shocked how much they knew about our life.
And actually, when the wall came down, every East German or former East German citizen had the right to have a look into his or her file. Actually, he had to write to the Stasi-Behörde, which is actually the office where they kept everything. And then you had to wait, because it was tons and tons of material. And I tried for several years, I tried to convince my mom to actually ask for the file, and she refused for several years, because she said, I don't want to know. I have an idea who actually spied on us, but I don't want to know, because mostly it were friends or close people you had a close relationship with. And eventually I convinced her, and it took about a year for us to a reply. And then I remember it was the day before Christmas, I think it was 10 years ago. We got this file or this letter, which contained about 6-7 pages. And it wasn't a file on my parents. We were quite shocked. It was a file on my grandparents, so, which started in 1953, which means they actually started spying on my grandparents already 4 years after the GDR was actually formed. They hadn't actually got to the time when my parents got together because they had so much to do. They had started in the 50s, and there was already a file on my grandparents. But the most shocking thing was what was actually written in that file, because it was things like, oh, on this day, my granny was sick. She had a flu. Things like that. You think it's something very, very important, but there were just really unimportant things. Somebody who knew her knew she was sick on that day, so it went into the file. So as you said, Jeanette, they knew everything, but it was also, excuse my French, bullshit what was written in there. But it was, we have to know everything about this person, and that was the whole atmosphere in that society.
I have a question. You talk about a society built on distrust. I'm wondering, how did that affect your relationship with your peers and your friends, especially with their parents, if you didn't really know who knew what and was doing what and giving information? Like, did that play a role in making friends at school and things of that nature?
I think now looking back, we can see a lot of things, but at that time, I think I didn't have any distrust issues with my friends or my parents' friends. You know, I'm wondering still, I haven't looked into the files yet because my mother wasn't interested in finding out either. I mean, both my parents have passed, so I am interested now to see who the people were that might have spied on them. I've got some ideas, but yeah, I never, it didn't affect me that I distrusted people. I just think I'm somebody that listens to her stomach, and that has served me well. So I think in that regard, I have a good kind of antenna. So, but not that I was kind of as a child distrustful. No.
Well, I think I'm a bit different in that, and because what you also shouldn't forget in this context, we were the only Black kids. I mean, okay, you had Jilly, you had your sister, but I was always the only one. I was the only Black child at any school I went to in a former GDR. I was always the only one. There was no one in my neighborhood. There was no one at school. There was no one in the swim team. So I was the only one. And you probably think after a while that you are the only one. There's no one else. And people look at you like, yeah, well, he came from Mars and something like that. And as I said, this whole narrative of you have to be grateful is from people. I didn't know anything about Africa because my father wasn't there for a long time, for a long period of my childhood. Not that he wanted to, but he simply wasn't there. And of course, you couldn't go anywhere in East Germany. You shouldn't forget, people were not allowed to travel, except maybe to Russia or to the Eastern country, but were rare occasions where people could actually go abroad. So everything they knew about Africa was what they were taught at school themselves, or maybe some books if they were lucky, but there wasn't much. So they had their own idea. And of course, that's what I knew. So I believed, actually, I have to be grateful. And I believe that everybody is poor in Africa. I thought that Africa is a country, which I think a lot of people still think. They don't understand that Africa is a country of so many, is a continent with so many countries. And when I went to Africa, I realized these were all lies. This was all lies. Of course, you have poverty and you have conflict, but this is my family there, and everything I was told in my childhood, it was a lie. So of course I got very distracted. I didn't trust people after that because they lied to me, basically. They lied to me because they didn't know better, but it didn't make a difference for me. They just told me lies. So after that, I've had quite a lot of difficulties to trust people. That's true, yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a follow-up actually. After your trip to Africa, when you realized everything you learned was pretty much wrong and opposite, were there, like, did your friends and your peers, were they willing to listen to that and were interested in that at all? Or was that something where you came back and no one really, I don't know, believed it per se or cared to hear it? I'm just wondering.
Well, I have to say, when I came back to East, it is a bit more difficult. My mom and I, we went to Ivory Coast because my dad was already there. We spent some time in France before that. And my mom, she packed her stuff and she was ready to go to Africa because she wanted to be with my dad. It didn't work out, mostly because I got very sick. And it got to a point where the doctor said the child has to go back to Germany. You can't help her here. Now, my parents had just moved everything to Abidjan, and they simply couldn't go back just like that. So they decided to send me back on my own to live with my grandmother again. So I went back on my own and stayed with my granny. But I moved in a different circle. I didn't go back to the friends I left behind. I lived with my grandmother. So I met new people. I went to a new school. I met new people. And mostly I had to concentrate on getting well again. I wasn't really well. I had lost a lot of weight and I was really sick. And during the time with my grandmother, I got better. And only when my mom was ready to come back, she came, but that was half a year later. So, and then we quickly decided, because my father was still in Africa and we were back in East Germany, we have the same situation as before. We moved to the West. So I didn't have a lot of time to make friends in the East again. When I came to the West, I had Jeanette and her family, and she basically became, my closest friends. And I had friends at school as well, but I never got too close with them because then I changed school again. And so shortly after that, I got in contact with other Black Germans. That's when we started the ISD, and these became my focal point, these people. So we were very focused on our community, and I would be lying if I said it was that we were politically active in the beginning. No, it was party time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time with actually with the American GIs, you know. We went to the Black clubs. That was actually when we were 15. We spent our weekends at the barracks, listening to music and going to the movies
Yeah.
or I hang out at your place where lots of Africans were always there.
Right.
So,
My parents had so many friends, also mixed couples, and they had kids. So we would see quite a few Black Germans our age, you know, because those people also had kids. So I think we might have seen more than most other Black Germans because our parents were together. They had friends that were together and they had kids. So in that regard, we saw a lot of Black Germans during our time. So yeah.
Yeah, and one really important aspect is that our parents, they stay together. I mean, your parents, unfortunately, they are dead, But my parents are still together. I mean, they have been together since 1965, and they are still together, which is really, really rare for Black Germans of our generation. Now it's a bit different, but for our generation, Black Germans in their 50s, I don't know actually any other Black German from my surrounding where the parents are still or stay together.
Yeah,
I don't know them. So
that's
that's really, really rare. Yeah.
Speaking of parents, and our time is getting close, but we have one more picture to share from this morning that maybe we can discuss. Let's see here.
Oh yeah, my dad. That was when he was going through his through his apprenticeship and as a photographer. So he must have been on some kind of shot where they were shooting something, and yeah, somebody took a picture of him behind the camera. Yep.
And so
Yeah.
both of your fathers worked at various times for DEFA, right?
Yes, my father worked there. I can't say how long he worked there because his issue was later he developed kind of like he couldn't work with the chemicals anymore to develop film and things like that. So he at one point really had to kind of leave that profession. So he got through the apprenticeship, he worked for a little bit in it, but back when he then had to move to West Germany, he got into something totally different because he couldn't work with the chemicals anymore.
Yeah, and my dad, he worked as an extra. I mean, for sometimes they needed for mass scenes in films, they needed just some Africans in traditional clothing walking, I don't know, walking from exactly from left to right and back. He didn't actually have a big role, but that was a way of just supporting your income. I don't know, they didn't get much, but yeah, that's how a lot of students actually just earned a few extra mark because there was actually there was a point when the East German film industry tried to portray an international image of something. I mean, it was ridiculous because people couldn't go anywhere, but they made some. Yeah, I remember one comedy where my father it played at an airport and he had to be in a group of Africans and it was actually called Nelken in Aspik. It's a strange title, but I remember I saw it with my mom and in the cinema, and when that scene came up, I was like, "Oh, this is Daddy," and something like that. But he never worked as an actual actor. He was more with his band and playing, but he just loved to do that. Yeah, he was always a very outgoing type of guy. He still is actually. So he's going to be 80 this year. But he's still the life of a party. Give him a party and he's
there.
He is. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What about your kids? Are they close? And how does your different childhoods, how does that impact how you parent? And how do you see childhood in Germany today differently than the childhood that you experienced?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Jeannine.
No, I would say that my kids are very cosmopolitan. And the funny thing is that our kids are actually, they are choosing a bit of the same careers. I mean, your son is a singer and he's writing his own songs. That's what my daughter does. My son is a filmmaker. And we have family all over the world. I mean, we've traveled, we have family in Sweden, we have family in the Caribbean, we have family in Africa, of course, in America, and that's how they see the world. I mean, they see themselves as cosmopolitans, and they are very grateful actually to have their grandfather to tell his story. Whenever, let's face it, they still sorry, teach a lot of bullshit at school about Africa still. But contrary to me, my kids can actually say, no, that's not true. I was there. It's actually like this. So they challenge every image, every wrong assumption about what Africa is like in person, and they're very outspoken, and they see it as an enrichment to have this heritage of different continents. They don't see it as a problem, and they are very proud to say, yeah, I'm Ghanaian, Swedish, Trinidadian, German. They actually love to just to put it in your face. So, and that is quite healthy, and they have a special relationship with my parents. They have a different relationship than I have, and I realized that my dad sometimes tells stories to my kids he never told me. I just sit next to them and I think, Dad, you never told me that. And so I'm still learning by listening to them, and that's quite a nice experience.
Well, my kids all were born in the United States, but you know, like Jeannine said, my kids question everything. It was important for me to teach them. You don't just take things if they don't make sense to you. You keep asking questions, and yeah, they're glad too that they have this different culture. But it was, even though they sailed through school, but they were always different. You know, they were like children, but not African American. So you know, they were like looked at different of their opinions, and you know, sometimes made fun of because they wouldn't speak like you would expect, you know, what people think African Americans talk like, you know. So in that regard, they were always a little different, and they felt that too. But they're happy for those two cultures they grew up in. So yeah, like Jeannine is saying, cosmopolitan, definitely, and all of them want to leave the United States. So my daughter lived in Japan for 1.5 years, and she is ready to go back. And my oldest son is also ready to leave. Yeah, so we'll see.
You can come back to Berlin.
Oh, they all would. They all would. They love it. Mm-hmm.
So you could. We go partying again.
Yeah, right.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more. We're very, familiar in Black German studies in the U.S. One of the main narratives through is, Black German solidarity really started with the visit of Audre Lorde to Berlin and the sort of coalescing around her visit there, and Maya Yim and Faba Buchanan, and then you go from there. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your experiences during that time and with relation to the ESD, but also to these big players.
I mean, like Jeannine said earlier, it was just great to get together. We just loved being around each other because we didn't have to explain certain things, you know? I mean, you didn't have people, like Jeannine was saying, even though that I don't recall that happening to me. It might have, and I blanked it out, but people touching my hair, I probably would have totally gone off. But things like that, or, it was just a very easy kind of feeling being around your people, because no things to explain. It was just all about having fun and getting to know each other and hearing each other's stories. And I think that's when Jeannine and I realized how different our upbringing was than most of them, because most the ones that we had as friends, their parents were not together anymore. They didn't grow up with their African part or African American part of the parent. So in that regard, I mean, some of the stories we heard, we just couldn't believe it. I mean, so I don't know, Jeannine, what do you?
Yeah, I think we were quite privileged in that. I mean, we had a lot of people who were adopted as well. And when we started the Bundestreffen, the annual meetings, we always had a workshop finding our fathers in most cases, because there were lots of people who just simply didn't have any information. Maybe because their moms didn't want to talk about it, maybe they didn't know. And it was a very difficult process in finding your identity for them, which we didn't have to deal with. We had to deal with other things, but in that respect, we were actually quite privileged. And yeah, you mentioned Maya. I mean, I knew her, and we last year we actually the book about her came out, and we had actually a memorial service at her grave. Her grave is actually just 5 minutes. The cemetery is 5 minutes from my place. I just went there last week. Sometime I just go there and visit her. Actually, 3 of her or our friends are buried next to her. So the Afro-German community at the cemetery is getting bigger, unfortunately, but they're all together, which is a nice idea. I don't know. We were the party, the party people, and it took a while before we actually thought, okay, we have to work politically, which was actually 86 when we really started to form some structures. I mean, my first Bundestreffen was in 1986. You were there as well.
Yeah, we were there together. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we were there together.
Was in Wiesbaden. And the funny thing was, near Frankfurt, there was a Frankfurt group which were actually Afro-Germans born in the 1950s. And I still remember, I came into this room full of Black Germans, and I thought, oh, this is great. But my second thought was, my gosh, they're all so old. And they were probably younger than I am now. But there was I was about 18 or something, and I was like, no. And that's when we started in Berlin. And of course, the sheer number of Black people in Germany has grown so fast. Unfortunately, we still don't have exact numbers, because we have no census in Germany based on race. Because of our history. But there are estimates between 1 and 2 million. I don't know. I simply don't know. I just see us all the time, and I see Afro-Germans in the 5th generation. And what actually happened after the murder of George Floyd and the outcry worldwide is that suddenly there was also a renewed interest in Germany in racism and Black people. And well, I don't know how to say that. At some point now, I sometimes have a feeling it's too much. But actually, they can never be too much. You just have to put it into perspective. And anybody who tells me today, oh, I didn't know that, or I couldn't find any information on Black Germans, I would say, stop right there. Yeah. Go and do your homework, and then we can talk again. Mm-hmm. That was different 30 years ago. We had to find our own history. Now the history is there, yeah. And if you want to, you can find it.
Find something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And that was actually, I wanted to just quickly, wanted to say, you have a reason, all of you students, for choosing German, I suppose, because you have an interest in the German language, in the German culture, whatever. That's what I suppose. But there is so much more to Germany and to the German language, and maybe you can actually interest more people in your university just to find out, because German history is so interesting, and we are in the middle of Europe. And it's really, these are interesting times. So I think all the ideas people have about Germany are no longer true, because it's something that really is worth being explored. Just to make some advertising for my country.
Well, we'll advertise every day and in every one of our um, our sessions, you know, because we're always interested in encouraging students to be interested in our community. But regretfully now it's time for today's class to close. So thank you, Jeannine and Jeanette, for this
Thanks for having us.
for this enlightening
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
yeah, and for sharing your journey of sisterhood with us. Many thanks also to Emily and to Davidson College for making these amazing conversations possible. Today's recording will soon join the growing collection on our YouTube channel at Black Germans. Our 10th anniversary conference recordings are also all now online. Subscribe and turn on the notifications so you'll be advised as new ones are added. Sign up for our newsletter and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Eventbrite for details about upcoming events, like our public event with Jeanette and Jeannine coming up. You'll hear about that soon. And should you have enjoyed today's program, we invite you to donate to the BGHRA to purchase our branded items from our online store and also to help us support the translation and international distribution of Ngozi Akwosa's children's picture book, Rapulu's Rainbow Stars. Details on how to contribute and purchase are available on our website at bghra.org. Finally, we hope that you've been as enriched by today's conversation as we have, and we thank you all for your time and attention. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.